Welcome, welcome. My name's Oni, and this is Prolific, where storytelling meets reality. And today I'm here to talk about basically the effect of the word and its creative power in your life. So, one of my principal beliefs is that writing a book is one of the most powerful things you can do as an author and as a person living in reality because it actually teaches you about the nature of life you're living in, right? Because we have a very strong attachment to narrative as human beings. Like, narrative is actually, if you recognize it, is actually the central piece of your entire psychology, right? Every single thing you think, feel, believe comes from the narrative or the story you're telling yourself inside of your head. And so everything from beliefs, which then affect your relationships, to the way you make money. All of this is connected to the narrative you have in your head, right? And narrative can have a lot of different tones. So, like, if we think about traditional story, you have different genres, right? So, in different types of genre fiction, you can have like comedy, you can have a drama, you can have an action flick, you can have an adventure. All of these are a blend of the types of narratives we can have in our head. And now the difficult thing with narrative is that it's based in a cyclical form. Like, every single manifestation of anything that comes, there's a beginning, middle, and end that loops into another beginning. There's just everything works in a cycle, right? Because the entire world as we know it is based in frequency. Now, if a lot of these concepts are kind of new to you, I'm going to be hitting you with quite a bit. So definitely watch some of my other videos and just try to keep up. But definitely post questions down in the comments below if none of this is making sense to you, or if you're intrigued but you're not really sure where the entry is, because we're just kind of starting out raw and going for it. But I really want to focus on this idea first of narrative, because once you become aware of the narrative that is running your life, you then start recognizing what are the things that are going to spoke from it. So, for example, right, in a comedy, for instance, if someone crashes their car in a comedy, that can be a funny beat, right? That can create a very funny kind of circumstance, right? Or, like, I think of another a movie, A Dude Where's My Car, with Ashton Kutcher, where a guy literally gets his car stolen, and the whole movie is about him trying to figure it out and all these funny incidences that happen along the way. And because this is a comedy, this is played up for laughs, it creates a feeling of levity, right? It's a fun experience when he's going and doing that. But for instance, if we talk about a drama where it's like a struggling mother, and she, is on her last leg, and she just needs to get to work, and then she gets her car stolen, that's a very different beat. The same thing happens, but within the story and the narrative of the mother getting stolen, oh man, it's a disaster. Things are so bad. She's struggling. It's really tough. This is a very heavy emotion. This is going to create a lot of grief, a lot of struggle. And so we see that even in the lens of interpretation through our genre of narrative we have in our mind, our approach to different aspects or different events in our lives is different, right? Now, this is not necessarily to talk about what is creating these aspects, but this is literally just about the interpretation of this, right? This video is just about interpretation, how we take in information and how it fits into our overall narrative. So the value you're going to find in this is, once you become aware of your narrative and you know how to direct and write narrative, you then know how you can shift and change it. You learn how you can change things like tone, direction, right? Even voice. By knowing how to understand narrative, by learning how to write a book, you actually learn how to influence your own life in the tone and the perspective you take when you're encountering certain events and obstacles. So when you're late on a payment for your house, or you get stuck at the elevator or you hit a bunch of red lights, it's a funny moment if you want a comedy versus, being late for work and now your boss is mad at you and a stress-inducing, anxiety-driven kind of scene. But this is all based in our principal power of choice, right? Right here. And I should probably choose a different marker for this because choice is actually the biggest thing, is like we get to choose. Ooh, I realize my light is super bright. And so maybe that's too light here. I'll try and turn that down. Maybe this is better. Anyway, yeah, you can see me. Darky! Okay, so we see that choice is one of the most foundation. It's the foundation of this entire narrative creation that we're going through. And so when we direct our choice and we know, hey, what is the genre of the narrative I'm trying to build in my story, you now are able to affect the beliefs, the relationships, the way you make money, everything else as a result of it. The difficulty is if we do not start here with the element of choice, but for instance, we try to make more money by focusing on the money, or we try to make better relationships by focusing on the relationships before we figured out what narrative are the relationships playing. You ever find it where there's a pattern where no matter what you do, that like you keep dating the same person or you keep finding the same things happening over and over again? It's because every experience you're having is being filtered through the narrative that you have playing in your head. And so until you learn to basically read off a different script, it doesn't matter who the actors are. It doesn't matter who the delivery of the director even. You have to change the script. You have to change the genre. You might even be able to claim the same words, but literally by being a different director, by being a different chooser, by choosing differently, you actually then affect the narrative differently. And that then changes the relationships, the money, the beliefs that you have inside your story. And then from the direct redirection of the story, you now are able to create something that is in line with your desires and what you want, right? And so this is the power of understanding what your story is. This is why I think everybody should write a book, right? And if you want to learn how, look down in the description below. Check out my Skool group to learn how to write a book, as well as change your mind on psychology. Because where story meets reality is understanding that life is based on a fairly mechanical system of narratives and beliefs and energy that is interplaying with each other. And if you understand how the flow of this energy works, if you understand the narratives in the story that is happening, you are then able to interact and navigate yourself through that. And that's where you're able to then create or live within outcomes that are more fitting to your desires, right? Because coherence, which is power, comes from the internal world and the external world matching. But that can only happen when we have mastery of the narrative. If we don't have mastery of a narrative, we can't hope to ever fully understand what exactly is creating the results in our lives, right? And so you have to start with the narrative first, always first and foremost, right? This is why when we understand narrative and life from a narrative perspective, we start recognizing why certain things play out the way they do. Just like when we write a story, just like when we read a story, we understand that not every trial, when Frodo has to go to Mount Doom and then he's got to cross the plains with Sam and he gets split up from the Fellowship. This is for the people who know Lord of the Rings. If you don't know Lord of the Rings, what's wrong with you? Go watch those movies. Go read the books. Do something. Lord of the Rings is like foundational. But essentially, these trials happen and they occur so that he can effectively gauge and understand what it is he's trying to do to get the ring destroyed in Mount Doom. And that's his goal. But if he was just able to instantly do it like that, there's no story, there's no fun, there's no development. So there's, meeting the spider, splitting up with the Fellowship, meeting up with the Riders of Rohan, all the different things that happen along the way that make this journey worth watching. Now, we recognize that Any story worth watching is going to have trials, challenges, and difficulties. Yet when we seem to encounter those in our own life, there's a different tenor of it, and we get caught up in the character role of it. But if we can learn to start seeing the narrative and the story as what it is, we start seeing ourselves as just characters in a larger script, and we can choose what script. We can choose what kind of movie we're living in. This is why, again, I think writing a book is so important, because once you know how to actually direct the lives of characters on the page, you can then learn how to direct your very life in your own way and the way you want to. So, write a book, read a book, and learn how to direct your life. Learn and understand the narrative that you are running in your head, and then clarity will come as a result. I would like to ask you, what genre do you think your life is? And what changes, what patterns do you notice again and again in your story? Because if you can start noticing the patterns, maybe the encounters you have with your boss, the encounters you have with your close relationships, different people, different actors. But if you're noticing the pattern, that pattern is going to tell you what kind of story you're running. And then from understanding that story, you will understand yourself, your beliefs, and then know how to change that. So here's me inviting you to do that. If you want to learn how to master reality through mastering your own personal narrative, don't hesitate to join my Skool group down below and book a time with me. I'm looking for 6 to 7 figure entrepreneurs, as well as authorpreneurs who are interested in finding more coherence in their lives. So if that's you, don't hesitate to reach out and to learn more about how to master your own narrative. Anyway, stay happy, stay healthy. This is Oni Onyabor signing out. Peace.